Hello and welcome back to the Millie Fox Show. I'm so glad that you are here. This show is for the high achieving woman, the one who knows that there is so much juiciness and deliciousness available in life. And for some reason, even though she's checked off all the boxes, she's just not feeling that juiciness and deliciousness in her own life. So she's here to get to the bottom of it, to stop trying to be so freaking perfect and just be joyful and peaceful and present and all of those things. And in today's episode, I'm going to be diving into 5 things that I really learned while I was trying to save my marriage that didn't actually save my marriage, because that was not going to happen, and allow me to actually be happy and fully myself in the way that I knew I needed to be in my life, but that actually allowed me to become the woman that I am today, that attracted the relationship that I have now, which is night and day different in terms of healthiness, the communication, the polarity, the intimacy, all of these things. Okay? So I've got my notes here to make sure that I don't miss anything, and we're going to dive straight on in. So I would say this is so key for knowing, one of the key things for knowing if the relationship you're in is even one that is compatible, is that I learned my actual values. Okay. I went through and I decided or prioritized what things were most important to me in each area of my life. This is something that I do with all of my clients, is I put them through a values assessment, because ultimately, if your values, if you're not clear on them, and B, if they don't align with your partner's values, that is a very fundamental compatibility issue, right? So, I mean, if they're kind of not exactly on, then there are some workarounds. Absolutely. I'm not saying that all of your values need to be exactly aligned, but if there's a fundamental values mismatch, that's somewhere you got to start looking. And for me, I didn't really truly realize it, because the only thing I was doing was looking for where we did align. And then in those areas that I discovered that we truly were not aligned on a values front, once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unsee because from a psychological standpoint, one of the most important subconscious drivers of your behavior are your values. Okay? It's just, you cannot separate from it. So that's why if there's something you want in life and you're not getting it and you can't figure out why you're not getting it, there's a really good chance that you have a values mismatch with what your values are, and the thing that you say you want. The thing you say you want may somehow have some kind of a subconscious conflict with one of your top values. So that's just a little seed that I'm dropping there for you. You can, start to let that ruminate as it is. Okay. So before asking if your relationship is fixable or good enough, you can't just say something like, oversimplified, like from a values perspective, like, oh, family is important to me. We need to actually break down, in the realm of family, what do you value most? This is what I'm talking about. In the realm of career, what is most important to you, right? So that's the type of values assessment that I am really talking about and getting at here. So we need to distinguish between, I don't like how he's acting, that's a values mismatch, to something fundamental to who I am isn't being honored here. Okay. I hope you can see the difference here. Okay. And just dropping it right away, all of these things that I am talking about right now that I will be going through are things that are covered in my new beta cohort program called Decide. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. The second thing that was absolutely life-changing for me, not just in my marriage, but I'm talking across the board, was learning how my nervous system actually works. I spent nearly a year in a membership around the nervous system, around my nervous system, and it was this big, huge aha moment. Big light bulb went off in my head because I realized, even though I had done so much personal development work, I was witnessing myself in certain scenarios showing up, being a version of myself that I knew I wasn't anymore. You know, when you have those moments and you're like watching yourself acting in ways that you know that you've outgrown. But like it happens sometimes when you're back in your family of origin as well, right? Because specific people, specific places bring out parts of you that are very primal, that are very deep in the subconscious. And a huge part of that activates your nervous system, right? And I didn't have a good enough understanding of my nervous system to know what I needed to do. And what I wanted to do in those moments was to soothe myself by chasing, by suffocating the issue, by talking it to death, by giving it absolutely zero space to breathe. So I had to learn in those moments, oh, I'm actually really dysregulated right now. And the last thing I need is to overthink it to death, to talk it to death, etc., right? So I needed to learn what the different states of my nervous system were, what those felt like in my body, how I started to behave when I was becoming dysregulated. And then at a grander scale, at a bigger scale in my life, where was I contributing to regulation and where was I contributing to dysregulation? And I mean, let's pull back for a second here because I don't want this to be misinterpreted. Your nervous system is pretty much always in a state of flux, right? Because you're always monitoring your environment for safety. Your body is doing that automatically. And it's not like, oh, I'm permanently in a state of dysregulation because of X, Y, Z. Yeah, there is that like low grade chronic stress that can keep you in survival mode, right? But for the most part, you're not just like, I'm just dysregulated. You know, you're going in and out of regulation, and how big your window of tolerance is will determine how easily you get kicked out of a regulated state into a dysregulated state. Okay. And so from a big picture level, what I was looking at is how can I make my window of tolerance larger? Not so I can handle more stress, so I can pile more on, so I can, be busier and more productive and blah, blah, blah. But like literally, I had a very traumatic childhood. So my window of tolerance was small. I had never fully done any work to repair my nervous system to expand that window of tolerance. And even still, like if my fiance walks into the kitchen when I'm in there doing dishes, he knows I'm gonna jump. He knows he's gonna startle me almost every single time. Even if I'm not wearing headphones, I'm not doing anything, like he knows it's gonna happen. And that's because my nervous system still is not, soothed to that point where I don't have that response. Plus, I have a lot of stuff on my plate right now, so it's exacerbated. But that was the huge thing for me, was understanding, okay, what contributes to my regulation. Community was a huge piece for me. Having more vulnerable female friendships where I was actually seeing people in person, because like COVID did a number on all of us, right? And then also nature became a huge thing for me. Getting outside more, going for walks in the forest, and properly regulating bodily movement. So walks, yes, absolutely amazing, but watching what kind of workouts you're doing. So for me, yoga was a really big thing. And then watching it with things like strength training, HIIT training, anything high intensity. You got to watch that kind of stuff for overdoing it with your nervous system. So anyways, it's a full lifestyle thing that was extremely life-changing. So when I learned about that and I was able to know what I needed and become that person, in terms of leading myself with the nervous system work, it became even more glaringly obvious what was going on, because, there was more clarity from my side. That's it. That's what I'm going to say. Okay. The third thing is actually a few different things. Okay. So there was some relationship stuff that I started to understand on a deeper level about myself, my behaviors, my past. So some of these things were attachment patterns, right? So you guys have probably heard of secure, anxious, avoidant. I did a lot more learning into those things. And codependency. Learning about codependency, hands down, became one of the biggest learning opportunities that I had in my life, because I didn't understand codependency. I think most people think that codependency is really just being overly needy and reliant on another person, but that is not the full picture. Codependency is actually a form of basing your well-being on other people's reactions or emotional states. So an example of this could be people pleasing. People pleasing is a form of high functioning codependency. So when you are people pleasing, ultimately what you're doing is you're manipulating another person's experience of you so that you get to avoid discomfort. Okay, so there was this just big, again, another light bulb moment that went off for me, where I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how codependent I was, because when we would get into fights, I wouldn't be able to be okay unless I thought that things were resolved, unless I thought, he wasn't mad at me anymore, or blah, 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 blah. Right? I couldn't, or, if somebody's in a bad mood and you can't let them be in a bad mood because you make it about yourself, that's codependency. Okay. And it was really me thinking that I was fighting for the relationship and doing the right thing and being so dedicated to solving the problems. But really what it was me fighting to take the discomfort away from myself because of the disconnection that I was feeling. Okay. So this is understanding your own behaviors and like, oh, I didn't realize that when I was doing this, that's what I was doing. And this is where I was contributing. Right. And this isn't about like, oh, taking all the blame. This is about clearing and cleaning your side of the street, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't do that, if you don't understand your own patterns and what you've contributed so far, you're going to take that stuff with you wherever you go, because the expression wherever you go, there you are is very, very true. And that was one of my big fears too. That was one of my hesitations when I started dating, especially when I started dating my fiance, and it started to, become pretty obvious pretty quickly that this was going somewhere real. And I remember having the conversation with my friends going like, I don't know, like it's only been 6 months since I've gotten out of the relationship. Like technically it was more than 6 months. It was actually more than a year from the time that I'd moved out of the master bedroom. But anyways, I was like, I don't know. How do I know that, I'm not just going to be walking into something that is just another version, like dressed in different clothes, and my friends reflected back to me, especially my closest friends that know the type of personal development journey that I've been on. said to me, like, you know, Millie, you've been doing this work for like 5 years. Like we've watched you, we've seen you, we know what you've been doing. And so you really are ready for this. And it was validated, okay? Because I'm in a relationship that is night and day. I do not act the ways that I acted in the past. And it 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 shows, you know what I mean? Like you get what you put out. It's absolutely true. And so, you know, learning all of these different things, I know I'm only on 3 of 5 right now, but learning all of these different things could very well save the relationship that you are in right now, right? Like it could, these could be the things. So I'm not out here, again, like I'm going to be saying this often, but I'm not out here advocating for women to just leave because it's the easier thing to do, because it's easier and you know, society likes to hate men and blame men. And, you know, I never wanted to write anything off. I will go to the ends of the earth to exhaust every possible solution to a problem if I believe that there is any hope there, right? That's part of who I am. Like I am tenacious to the bone, right? So anybody who accuses me of giving up too easily doesn't know me, doesn't know the story. And moving on to number 4 was another key piece. Like, I'm not lying when I tell you, when I learned each of these things, I was like, oh my God, this is like groundbreaking. Okay. And that's why all of these things are in the program. Decide. Like, obviously, you're not going to be able to make these shifts by hearing me in a 20-minute podcast talking about each. Like, I spent so much time with each of these things, understanding, learning, listening, reading. So the 4th one was communication. And it's a form of communication that allows the other person to not feel wrong, right? To not feel attacked, to not feel like they're having the finger pointed at them, right? And it's such an incredible communication framework. Actually, it's 2 different communication frameworks that I've blended together because I took what I found most valuable from each of them. And essentially, the communication framework in and of itself causes you to have to be a different person. Because in order to communicate, and you know, you've probably heard a million times in the past, like use feeling words, use I statements, like all that stuff makes me like want to gag a little bit, because I'm like, yeah, this feels super unnatural, and like people don't get it. When you say use feeling words, they don't actually use words that are feeling words. They'll be like, I feel like you are. That's not a feeling statement. So what we learn in this communication framework, what I was forced to learn, was to actually understand, first of all, how to be neutral in my observations instead of accusations, right? Learning how to be an observer rather than accuser. Learning to actually verbalize my feelings. Okay. You have to slow down quite a lot to be able to do this. You have to be able to be regulated and understand your nervous system. And then you have to actually know what you need. You need to actually do the work. You may need to sit down with a freaking journal to be able to use this communication framework. And yeah, maybe in the heat of the moment in a fight, that might feel cumbersome, but it's so helpful to actually go, okay, I think I need to pause here in this conversation to go do the work to find out what's really coming up for me with this, and why I'm feeling so much emotion, and why I'm feeling so bothered, because there's a story that's existing here, and right? And then you go do the work to understand what is the need underneath this feeling, and then how to formulate a request so that you can be a helpful partner, that you can suggest a productive outcome, right? Instead of just, again, pointing the finger. This becomes a collaborative effort you helping them help you, help me help you. You know what I'm saying? So it's really radical responsibility, but then also it allows the other person to hear you rather than to immediately put, blinders up, all of this all of these guards up to protect themselves from what they are perceiving from you, right? Like fire is coming at me. I need to shut down and protect. I can't listen. I can't think about your needs. Right now, all I can think about is my needs because I'm under attack. This is basic human nervous system and survival mechanism. So the nervous system is built in for survival, right? So here we go. The other thing that I learned in terms of communication were some really incredible concepts from an incredible man named John Gottman. And he talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are the 4 things that show up that are most likely to predict divorce, right? And those are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So understanding about those, understanding what are bids. Bids are like when a partner is reaching for your attention in many different ways. Bids happen throughout the day. How many of those bids get ignored? How many of those bids get returned? What are the antidotes to those 4 horsemen? Absolutely groundbreaking. And now this stuff is ingrained in me. I can hear myself when I am being defensive. I can see myself when I am being critical, and I know what the antidotes to those behaviors are, because it's not like any of us are going to be perfect all the time, right? So learning to communicate well, okay, values and communication, these 2 pieces are so helpful for anybody who is not sure if their marriage is, even possible of saving, right? It will give you so much better information when you know that you are using the highest form of communication, the clearest form of communication, the most respectful form of communication. When you know about those values, these pieces are super duper duper key, okay? Because if you're not communicating well, you can't just say like, he doesn't care about my needs, right? If you learn to communicate clearly and you take on that radical personal responsibility and, make an actual request, and then the need still isn't consistently met, then now you have different information, right? You have better information, and that is huge. All right. The final piece here is the fun stuff. Okay. This is really, really, again, super life-changing for me, because what I didn't realize was how culturally acceptable it is and how ingrained in women it is to not understand the masculine. Just all we know is like toxic masculinity, and it's like grunts and burps and whatever, and control and power. But really understanding the dynamic of the masculine and feminine together so that you can create polarity. And I've heard so many people say, oh, we have zero intimacy, or women are even repulsed by, the men in their lives, and they don't even want to be. They don't want to be repulsed. They want to be attractive, and they can't understand why. And there are other things that go into it, right? Like dealing with resentment and communication needs. Everything is foreplay. I'm of the belief that literally life with your partner is foreplay. And it's not like, oh, I just need, 20 minutes of warm up time to get into it. Like, no, you need to set the stage for it, right? And a huge part of that is these dynamics, right? And just sharing a little bit of my story, I had a very cut off relationship, very vanilla robotic, let's put it. And now it's like, whoa, where was this all my life? That's what I'm going to say about that, and lead into next week's episode, which is going to be fun and spicy. So the feminine masculine dynamics, like, let's talk about this. Motherhood is a highly masculine role. So if you in your household are constantly feeling like the manager, you are constantly controlling everything, or even becoming parental, if you're becoming like your husband's mom, it really messes up that polarity dynamic, and then there's no space for that playfulness, that spiciness, the admiration, the pursuit, your receptivity. This isn't turning it into like a rigid men need to be like this and women need to be like this rules, but this really is the energetic dynamic that you are both contributing to and that you personally really would want in a relationship, that makes you feel most like yourself, so that you can actually exhale, so that you can actually receive, so that you can actually feel the inspiration to want, to desire, right? So I'm really excited about next week's episode to dive more into what does that look like to respect the masculine, and what does that look like to honor your feminine. And even that statement, like, oh, respect the masculine, it could be triggering for some people. So that's it. I went a bit longer than I usually do on these episodes, but to summarize it here for you, I learned my values. I understood my nervous system. I understood my patterns, essentially my relationship patterns, my attachment patterns, codependency, etc. I learned how to actually communicate in a way where I could be heard and not make the other person wrong. And I learned about masculine and feminine energy dynamics and how that was contributing to the level of intimacy or lack thereof in my marriage. And all of this rolled into one has made me into a much better partner, and brings a smile to my face because I'm proud of the woman that I am. Obviously, more work to be done. I am absolutely not perfect, and my fiance definitely can still get annoyed with me, as do I with him. But we're both open. We have courageous conversations, and we're both really respectful to each other when we have those conversations. So that is what we've covered, and it's just a start of what will be going on in Decide. When this episode airs, I will be running a challenge called Before You Decide. And it's hosted in a free private Telegram group where I'm dropping voice notes, challenges, homework, etc., before the doors to Decide officially open. Decide is starting on September, I think it's the 14th. It's the Tuesday. September the 4th, I think it's the 14th. So the challenge itself is running from August 13th to the 23rd. So if you're interested in joining the challenge, I will link the document that has the details in the show notes here, or you can just DM me on Instagram and DM me the word before. Okay, and we'll get you the details for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here, listening to this episode. If you found it helpful, please share it with someone, share it on your stories, tag me, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to leave me a review, I would be beyond grateful, because I really do want to take this podcast far and wide, because I know that there's not a lot of people talking about this stuff. And, when I talk to people and I ask them what they've been listening to, they, the podcast that they share with me and whatnot, I'm like, okay, that's a part of the picture, but we're really going in on all of the picture here of what's happening. And tune in next week. Every Friday, I drop a new episode. Next week's episode is going to be a little spicy one of how I found that inner freak inside of me that had been lost for so long. Anyways, love you guys so much.